Lizzie Pierce is a photographer and videographer who has made a name for herself on YouTube and Instagram. On her YouTube channel, you'll find everything from super useful photography advice to super useful business advice. She has forged her own path as an entrepreneur and video producer, which is no easy feat. Lizzie's channel currently sits at 225,000 subscribers and almost 10 million total channel views. But instead of me babbling on, why don't we talk to Lizzie about herself? Lizzie, how you doing today?
Hello, I'm very well. I can't wait to talk to you about myself.
Yeah, right on. So I've obviously watched some of your videos, and there was one, it was basically your story in 60 seconds, and you talked about starting a video production company, and you ran that for 2 years, I believe you said. Can you tell us a bit about that? Like, I think, usually we tend to focus on YouTube with this podcast, but a really important part of YouTube, I think, is experience that leads up to it. So, like, you started this company. It sounds like you did a lot of really cool work. Tell us, like, what was going through your head, why you did it, and about that whole thing.
Yeah, so I started the production company with my husband, who is also a YouTuber, Chris Howe. So I was working at another production company downtown. They had a focus on corporate video production. They did a little bit of commercial work, but not too much. And then Chris was freelancing. We both knew that we really wanted to build something ourselves, and it made a lot of sense to work together just because he already had some clients in the government space, and I had a ton of knowledge from my full-time job at that production company, where I left as a junior producer, essentially. And when we started working together, it just felt like everything picked up really quickly. So we had a focus on initially corporate video production, and our main client was government. Then that expanded into really like any business that needed a good internal corporate video. Then that expanded a little bit more into commercial, mostly online, producing assets for campaigns for businesses through like Facebook or Instagram or YouTube. And then because of our knowledge in social media, we were kind of trying to grow our followings on the side, mostly Instagram at first. We were providing insight for our clients saying, hey, we can make you this video, but if you also don't take our knowledge and, of the online space, you can use us as a tool and we can help you market this entire campaign. Like, we can make that video, but if you listen to our advice and how we want to position you for it, we can actually get some eyes on this. And so then we moved into a bit more of an agency perspective and helping people actually develop full marketing campaigns associated with those videos. And again, this was just Chris and I. We had a lot of people we were working with as well, but Chris and I were essentially like the whole full-time company. So there were a lot of people on a contract basis, and we were still really young. So we were just kind of flying by the seat of our pants, learning here. And then we knew we really wanted to we wanted to travel more on a personal level. And so that's when we started reaching out to tourism boards, wanting to produce content for them. So by the end of it, right around the time that we started YouTube, we were still, we do still have the production company, but it's molded into something completely different now. Right around the time we started YouTube, we were working with different car companies like Mercedes-Benz, Volvo. We've worked with Corona since. It's now become a blend of everything since starting YouTube and growing our personal brands, because we can, in the same way that we were providing knowledge and insight in those campaigns initially, into, how can you guys use your platforms to make sure that this content we're producing gets seen? We can say, hey, we already have the distribution already, so hire us, we'll make you high quality content, which a lot of, if you want to just say influencers they can make good content, good, but we can make something that's really great, and we have the platforms to be able to distribute it. And that's what has led into like our favorite projects to work on right now, are with tourism boards, which unfortunately did take a pause during the pandemic, but that's kind of where we're at now.
So when you say tourism boards, that sounds like it involves a lot of traveling, going to cool places, taking cool shots of cool places.
Yes,
Is that
yes.
that does sound pretty awesome? And
It's
I know
fun. It's
you
tiring,
said,
but fun.
yeah, you did say you and your husband wanted to travel more for work, and sounds like you succeeded at that.
Yes, we did. I don't think we anticipated how much we would end up doing because of it. And so now that, especially during the pandemic, like you get really settled. We got 2 cats, and our family's here, of course. And, you know, we have any family issue that's going on, you want to be here for that. But at the same time, you know, traveling is such a big part of not only our business, but in what really lights us up. So it's been a delicate balance of figuring out, okay, what feels good for us in terms of like not only financially, but in terms of a comfort level of having some kind of balance. Some people, I'm sure, really thrive off of traveling 24/7. They live that nomadic lifestyle. You know, they don't have a home base. And I really admire that, although I don't think I could do that for very long, maybe a month or 2. I really like having a place to come back to that's close to my family and my friends. And so it's been fun to, and I'm like fun, I kind of say sarcastically, it's been interesting to navigate that. And I mean, I've had my fair share of breakdowns and feeling like, how am I like, why did I book this way? This is too many things back to back. You know, and figuring that out. It's a learning process, but we're extremely lucky and extremely fortunate, you know, even though I say that it can be hard sometimes. We're so lucky that this is our job and we love it.
Yeah, that's the weird thing I think about kind of creating your own path is when it starts going well, you start getting all these offers and you want to take them. And it's work. And especially when you get to travel somewhere cool, you almost feel like if you don't take it, then you've kind of wasted your time doing all this. It's like you got what you wanted, but then there's all these like logistics involved and time and energy and but it's also still awesome and it's a blast. But I understand the kind of mixed feelings involved there for sure.
Yeah.
So I did want to ask, you of course have this production company and sounds like you are still very much involved with that company and your YouTube channel. So I guess what is your YouTube channel to you? Like, is this just a place where you can kind of post and express yourself? Is it another avenue where you can kind of just market yourself? Like, what was your goal with starting this?
My goal with starting the channel was to be a female in the space that didn't exist before. In simply someone who, you know, was a woman who had a successful career in the video photography space, because I didn't feel like there were enough. And even though I didn't necessarily feel like I was, you know, the best at what I do, especially at the time, like I've improved so much even in the few years that I've been on YouTube. I thought, you know, if I want to see more of that, then I'm just going to have to step forward, because it's a lot of women always feel like, oh, I have to wait until I feel 100% ready for something before I actually go ahead and do it. And I think statistically they found that men, I think, wait until they're like 50 or 60% qualified to like apply for a job or to take that next step forward. And so I thought, okay, whatever, I'm just going to do it, because if it inspires one other woman or one other person, whoever, to go ahead and, you know, launch their career, start their creative business, or, you know, be a photographer, be an editor, whatever, then I'll consider it a success. And then it's kind of snowballed after that, because once I did realize that, okay, this is, you know, the visibility of people just seeing my face here is helping and making a difference. What else can I do? So the channel's become fulfilling for me, because I can teach people everything I know, and encourage people to try new things. And you know, selfishly, it's fun for me to get to try out new pieces of gear and try out new styles of photography and that kind of thing. But really engaging with other people, and it's hard because I don't necessarily feel like I'm as engaged as I want to be, even through YouTube. But having a platform to say like, here, like take all of what I know and I can help, feels good. And so right now I'm in the place of trying to develop some products and hopefully courses soon and things like that, where I can have more one-on-one time with some of my subscribers to be able to help. Because at the end of the day, I don't think like at a certain point when it comes to photography or filmmaking, you do want to make great art. You want to make something pretty. You want to make a living at it. And once you start to check out those boxes, you're like, well, what do I do now that is going to get me up in the morning? So I think helping everybody, helping like this community with their photography, videography, starting their careers, is something that could go on, forever. And I'm just going to keep looking for different ways to help. So yeah, it's a very long answer.
No, it was great. It sounds like you just want to help people and kind of teach them things that you've learned. And I mean, it's kind of, so I just bought some really nice photography equipment, and I've been kind of working on getting into the space and whatnot. And it is kind of confusing. It's like, it's not obvious exactly who to call, where to go. Obviously you can make a LinkedIn profile and do all the normal job application stuff. But I think with this space in particular, and maybe just because it's involved, it's like at the intersection of art and business, it can be particularly confusing. It's not like you're just being an accountant or something where the path is pretty clear. So I think it is really helpful to have somebody who has been there, done that, and it sounds like you're going to make some courses and have one-on-one interaction, as you said. I feel like that's going to be valuable for people for sure. And so another thing I wanted to talk about, you had a video that was like your 9 income streams. So I think when we talk about YouTube, a lot of people, of course, are interested in monetizing YouTube. Can you tell us about like what are your 9 income streams and how did you achieve them?
Honestly, I'll try to recite off as many as I can, but I know there's 9. I think the most interesting are probably some of the bigger ones, and one that everyone is most familiar with is probably sponsorships, and that's the simplest and most lucrative way to get started, just because it gives you that bit of financial foundation to then start doing other things and branching out more and figuring out what you want to do with this whole YouTube thing. But I think something that's important to remember is a lot of people think like, oh, getting those big sponsorships, if you want to, say you want to be a YouTuber, there's so much more than just posting videos every day and getting that big sponsorship and making tons of money and, that's it. That's your be all end all. There's no way that's going to last for the rest of your life. So the challenging part that a lot of people forget about being a YouTuber or being a successful YouTuber is you're really a business person at the end of the day, in my opinion. If you want longevity, if you don't want to be a flash in the popularity pan, and a lot of this job is, who's really cool right now and doing whatever and where are your eyeballs at? You have to think like a business owner, and that's so hard. And I do have some knowledge in that because I did go to university. I took business courses. I have a background as a video producer. But this is my first time. I'm not a veteran coming in here at 50 years old, having, worked at many other companies, started other businesses. A lot of this, I'm learning how to expand as I go. I know how to run a production company, but how to actually market my own digital products, that's something I haven't really done before. Develop online courses, can't say I've done that before. I didn't go to teachers college, So a lot of this, I'm kind of learning as I go. And in terms of cycling back to income streams, sponsorships is a great way to get started. And that is still a big part of my income. And that's also why I'm at this stage where I am diversifying. I have only been doing this for a couple years, so it takes time. And it's only me, and I have one other full-time employee right now. Of course, there's ad revenue, which, depending on what kind of channel you have, and what your format is of those videos. That could be, or how many views you get even. That could be, like, it's definitely good, but it's not a massive, source of income. A lot of these little ones, like if you talk about affiliate marketing where you get paid a percentage of like the product you sell, all of them add up. So if you're a YouTuber that, say, doesn't have a ton of subscribers, like we can go back to when everyone thinks like 100,000 subscribers is like the goal to reach, or 1 million or whatever. When I had sub 100,000 subscribers, say like 60, 70, I was already making 6 figures because I'd maximized all the revenues that I could possibly have. So
Whoa.
if you are thinking like, it's not necessarily like the numbers of your subscribers doesn't equal to how much money you make. I know YouTubers that probably have more subscribers than I do, but I could be making, I don't know for sure, but I know that there are some where I'm making a higher income than them based on how I structure it. So really the key is, the reason I have 9, and if I would say probably go watch that whole video and I'll explain what each of them is in great detail. The reason I have 9 is because you want to diversify, diversifying your income. You've heard it over and over if you've paid attention to how to structure your life and your business anyways, but diversifying your income in your business is the best way to continue making a living, especially during a worldwide pandemic, for example. When one goes down, another one goes up, and et cetera, et cetera. And 1 month, your views on videos might be down, but maybe you made a ton in affiliate marketing, stuff like that. And obviously digital products is one of my income streams. And I'm developing more products there, hopefully soon online courses. Subscriptions is something I haven't really taken advantage of yet. And I'm not sure how that's going to work into my, my current portfolio, unless it's something, cause it's going to take a lot of time and like constantly creating some form of content for that.
Right.
So, I would just say that the reason there are 9, and the reason that YouTubers, any YouTuber you've seen for a long time has longevity, is because they're thinking like a business person, and they've diversified their income. That's the little.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool how much money you were able to make even before you hit 100,000 subscribers. So just to kind of give people an idea of how big of a deal this is. So you were saying you were making 6 figures off your YouTube channel before you hit 100,000 subscribers. That's correct, right?
Yep. I would say in combination with a little bit of the jobs I was getting from my production company as well. But those are kind of all encompassing.
Okay, sure. But so the reason I bring this up is, so my channel, Treesicle, I was working on a team with 3 other guys, and it was going well. The channel currently has about 900,000 subscribers and has had well over 100,000 subscribers for, like 7 years now. Every year, that channel was making probably about 120,000 per year, with everything totaled up. And that has way more subscribers and was probably getting, or it was definitely getting way more views than your channel is, but it was not generating nearly as much income because of how we were running it as a business. We were just trying to maximize for views. We were getting a lot of sponsorships and things like that. But I think, you talked about like affiliate links and all these things. That's something we weren't really utilizing. And I just... It's not necessarily a numbers game is what I'm saying. Right. People don't necessarily understand that subscriber count is sort of irrelevant. Like, it's relevant in the sense that you got a bunch of people to hit that button, and that's cool. But beyond that, it doesn't say much about the health of the channel. It doesn't say how much it is financially supporting you. It's more complicated than that. Correct.
And I think a lot of people attribute their success on YouTube to that number as well, which doesn't, what is your actual goal? Is it, if it's recognition from other people and the cool factor of it, then I also don't think you're ever going to get that, because there's always going to be another milestone. There's always going to be somebody bigger than you, better than you, whatever. So it's not a sustainable way to look at that or at your life. And in terms of like the income that you guys were making from the channel, like that's still amazing, but you were probably also so wrapped up in the content you were making. I don't know how much you were able to outsource, how much time that freed up for
Not
you
much.
to think big picture, to think about other products. It sounds like maybe you weren't charging enough for your sponsorships, or maybe there was a different sponsorship model you could have potentially looked at. There's developing other content as well that potentially you could have outsourced a bit. So it's hard. And a lot of times people think, if I can't do it myself, then I'm full and that's my capacity. But how do you grow? And which is a really exciting part about what we do. But also it's like, it never ends.
For real. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like what you said about not being able to kind of look at the big picture. And because we were really bogged down, like we were super busy every single day, every single week, and it never ended. And we did try to hire editors, but I think one problem that we had with our channel is we had too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. It sounds like your production company, it's just you and your husband, and anybody else is hired, which is a big, that matters, because we were essentially a team of 4 and everyone was equals. So, it's like if one person has a great idea, then there's going to be at least one other person on the team who thinks it's the worst idea they've ever heard. And because there's no hierarchy, it was like you could never get traction on anything. It was like, maybe we would start doing a plan for like 2 weeks or a month if we were lucky. And then, somebody would lose faith and it would just kind of like, it never ended. We were always kind of bogged down with the day-to-day of making videos and not necessarily looking at the long run. Part of this was because we were full-time, so we were dependent on the YouTube channel to pay rent and whatnot. Right. So do you feel like one reason that you've done this well on YouTube is because you have this production company and you have a way to make money outside of it? I think a lot of people, they want to live the YouTube dream, so to speak, but they don't necessarily realize that if you're relying on it, that you aren't necessarily going to make the best decisions, especially if you're relatively inexperienced running a channel.
In a way, starting made me less concerned and focused on making money from it. And I wouldn't advise that anyone start YouTube without having something that is going to pay your bills on the side, because it could be a very long road. You don't know how that's going to go for you. But when that time did change where my YouTube income surpassed what I was making from the company, and partly because we put a little less effort into it and, our attention was directed elsewhere, the pressure was on, but it's still something that the interesting thing about YouTube is if you're not making something that feels like your voice, or you're not really invested in, your subscribers sniff that out so fast, and your engagement will reflect that in a really weird way. Because if you're not excited about it, then it's not going to be good. No matter how many tips and strategies and tricks you think you're following and like other people's videos, you think, well, if I make it like this, then it'll get views because theirs did really well. They just somehow know. And I think if you want to get airy-fairy about it, it's probably because you're not being authentic to who you are. And a big portion of the success of you as a personal brand on YouTube is your personality. So a lot of times, like, the information we're sharing isn't new. We've had, like, think about the exposure triangle. How many people have talked about that on the internet 1,000 times, but people come to you to hear you talk about it because they like you and the way you present information, and they think you're funny and quirky and whatever. So if you're not being, it's corny, but if you're not being yourself and making content that you're proud of and you think is good or helpful, then it's not going to do well. And I still learn that every day, because it's hard that now, I rely on this channel and I've made bad decisions. I regret doing certain, whether it's a sponsorship or doing a certain type of video because I thought it was going to be popular. And then I'm like, this really isn't me. Why did I do that in the first place? Like, I don't want to talk about this. I'm not having fun. And it's a lot of trial and error and exploring what that is, what your channel is going to look like and be authentically you, if you will. And I think that the success will come based off of that.
I like what you said about being authentic. I think that's really important. So one thing I've brought up quite a few times on this podcast is sort of making the mistake that you just warned against. And I was quite young at the time, as was everybody I was working with. So the channel, Treesicle, is and was a video game channel. And we started by just kind of covering whatever we wanted, whatever was interesting. And that's what initially got us to, like 300, 400,000 subscribers. It was going well. But then this game called Five Nights at Freddy's came out, and kind of doesn't matter what the game was, but it was very popular and a lot of children liked it. We didn't necessarily know that when we started covering it. But we noticed every time we would cover this, we would get 5 to 6 times more views than normal every time we would cover Five Nights at Freddy's. So especially once we went full time with this and we were relying on it, this was of course very appealing. So we started it was like a slow process, a slow descent into hell, you could say, where we cover it once, then we covered it again like a few months later, and then it was like, oh wow, this really pays well. And then it just kind of got more and more frequent, and the more frequent it got, the more our like diehard subscribers were like, why are you covering this stupid game? This game sucks. Like, cover something more interesting, which they were totally right. But it was kind of like, I don't know, we felt like we had to, and we ended up isolating, we ended up basically upsetting our core audience, and getting this whole new audience, which was basically a bunch of like 9-year-olds. And our style of humor was very like adult, you could say, very edgy. So we ended up in this super weird space that I still like don't really have words for, where we're like, I don't know, we're still making sort of adult content, and then 9-year-olds are watching it. But then also the game itself was very messed up. It was like animatronic bears that would like murder people, and children's souls would get stuck in the animatronic suits. It was like very dark, very dark. Oh, so I don't feel like, we corrupted the kids or anything. The game was already doing that. But hopefully, I don't know, maybe it was destined that we had to tap into that weird corner of what was happening. Anyway, the takeaway here is that when you start really trying to maximize numbers, it's a trap. Like, because the more you do it, the more you end up kind of isolating the people who liked you for what you actually liked doing. And it's not that I didn't like Five Nights at Freddy's. It was just we're covering it too much. So it's like the more you do it, the more you're going to have to depend on it, which is scary. And you don't necessarily realize that while it's happening, unless you're, of course, listening to this podcast. So, yeah, it's one of the many, I think, pitfalls of business where you kind of end up maximizing short-term profit over long-term success, really.
Yeah, for sure.
It sounds like that's something you kept in mind. Like, you were always looking at the bird's eye view. And do you feel like that was really helpful for achieving what you have?
I try to be that kind of person with most things. I mean, I try to be as self-aware as humanly possible. And especially when it comes to YouTube, I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind, because like you said, when you started your channel, you were making videos about things that you found interesting because you were involved in the space. And chances are, if you thought it was really interesting, most likely somebody else also thought it was really interesting. So it goes the same with any channel, whether it's about like how to make a croissant or how to, take a certain kind of photo or edit a certain kind of photo. If I think it's cool and it's something that I want to learn and I find myself going to look it up, chances are maybe I should be making a tutorial about it. And so I think a lot of YouTubers or other content creators lose touch a little bit with what's going on as a person who's trying to learn and what they actually need, because we're so busy just making things that people are watching. And it's hard to have one foot in both areas. But so it comes with being self-aware of the things that like you're interested in, you want to learn. And so for a while I just thought, you know what, I don't like one video, for example, you know what I've always wanted to get into? Shooting film. I don't shoot film. I would love to shoot film. So I made a whole video about figuring out how to shoot film and shooting it for the first time and what I learned and buying the camera and going out on my first little film shoot and how I developed the footage, and I showed the final photos and all of that. And that did quite well. People thought it was interesting and fun to watch, and they could follow along through the whole process. So we do a lot of that even more, where people follow me on photo shoots and they follow me while I'm shooting this. And I think there's also a pressure on YouTube to feel like you're the best at everything, or like I know everything about this. And that's not necessarily the case. Like no one moderates the information that we're getting on YouTube. We're all just sitting here talking about what we know, you know? This is just my experience in doing this. And if you find that information useful or interesting, by all means, here you go. That's all we're doing. So I think, just trying to stay, overall, my advice would be like trying to stay in touch with what you think is interesting and what you want to try and what you think is cool. And the only feedback we get is numbers and eyeballs. And it's hard not to let that sway you and to attribute that to like a successful video. And a lot of times it does to a point indicate how many people were interested, but it takes a lot of time of sitting back and looking at the analytics and going, what is almost like the psychology behind why people watched this? What do we think they searched? Why do we think they liked it? Getting feedback, talking to people in the comments, doing polls and things like that, and reaching out to people sometimes individually if you're really at a crossroads, and talking to your core audience one-on-one. We forget about that with any business, with anything like that, you have to talk to the people that are like either buying your product or watching your service or channel or whatever. You have to keep in contact with them or you'll completely lose touch.
Yeah, that is one advantage of YouTube in general, is just the fact that you can do that. For so long in any media, you kind of had to rely on just these kind of generic polls, or the age before this one was a little more messy. Whereas now you can really directly interact with your audience and know what they want and what makes them tick and who they are. And it is good to take advantage of that if possible. One thing I also wanted to ask you, I think this is an interesting question as far as like getting to know your origin story. What is the first video you ever made?
It was probably one I made in high school on my little point and shoot Sony like hot pink digital camera that I got for Christmas, and it could only record I think like 2 minutes or 3 minutes of video at a time. And I shot these little videos of my friends and I just doing whatever, and I would make them into these like funny little sequences to sum up our day with like funny effects and colors and stuff.
Yes.
In I think Windows Movie Maker.
Yep.
And then I would export them and put them on Facebook.
No, I mean that's exactly the first videos I ever did. They still exist on Facebook, and Windows Movie Maker too. Like that was the program. That's how I learned it all.
Same. And everyone thought I was really like corny and lame for making them, but now we've watched them so many times and continue to laugh at how funny they are. And we're like, look at us, look, what were we doing, And I'm so glad I have them. They're the best. They're probably my most treasured videos.
I have the same experience watching my old videos. They're really fun. They're like a time capsule, and it's loved making them. They were a really good experience with my friends. I feel like we bonded over it and like showing the videos to the class. So I made a lot of videos in high school as well. It was usually for like an English project or something. We'd be reading some book and they were like, the teacher would give us an assignment. One of the options was to make a video, and my friends and I, we would always just go way too ham with making these videos with special effects and 3D animation and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, it was a blast, and I have no regrets, even though I'm sure some of them would be cringy now, but that's just part of the appeal.
Oh, yeah. So cringe. But that's how I figured out that I loved editing. Like, that's how I figured out I could really envision the whole scene in my head, whereas nobody else, like in my group at school, if we were doing it for a project, could see the whole thing. And I would be like, well, that doesn't make sense because you can't put this before that. Or you can't make that edit here. It'll actually be smoother if your hand is in this position and we cut it based on here and we have to cut it with the music. And it was stuff that other people didn't see. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I have a knack for this because I'm already kind of seeing things people don't really. And I enjoyed it. Like, I remember getting so invested, even though it was like a silly school project. I remember getting so invested. And like, it was like, you know, when you get in an editing groove, like, it's like the world doesn't exist. You have blinders on and that's all you're doing. And I would sit there for like hours and not know any time had passed because I was just so into what I was doing and making that whole sequence flow. So that's a great part about having access to stuff like that as a kid, whether it's through school or personally, and just trying things and not worrying too much about what your friends think, because you'll end up, that's how you find something that you really like and that you're good at. And everything you do in high school isn't cool. So whatever.
No, everything you do in high school is so cool. Everything I did was super cool. And I have no regrets at all.
I mean, I don't know. I don't remember. I don't know what thought of me. I didn't feel that cool.
No, believe me, I did not either. I don't think anybody did, as you said. So, do you feel like that was a formative experience for you? I think there's something about being young, like a teenager, and getting in that flow state, because I had the same experience where the world would just kind of disappear. In some ways, I'm still trying to recreate that, I think, as an adult. Do you feel that having the entire world disappear while you're editing a video, it kind of just, it solidified that this was what you were meant to be doing?
I don't know if I knew. I never was that kind of person where I said, you know, this is exactly what I'm going to do, this precise thing, and this is what I will do for the rest of my life. I knew that I was always more interested in creative things, whether it be music or things that are more like artistic, or it turns out like more media production, writing, stuff like that. But I remember, like, I still remember that moment. I was actually I was at my friend's house because he had a Mac and he had editing software like Final Cut, or I don't remember anymore, but I opened it up and he fell asleep. And I was just sitting at his computer editing the whole thing. And I didn't mind. I was like, I could wake him up. But honestly, I'm having such a great time. And that is probably what switched my mind initially from, I thought I was going to go to school for music or playing cello. And then that changed completely to, okay, maybe something more in media production or television. There's this broadcasting program in Toronto that's really highly recognized in, you know, even internationally as one of the top schools for media production. So why don't I apply to that, see if I like it? You know, that program also had a lot of different streams within it that you could go into, whether it was audio, whether it was like audio production or editing or video producing or writing. So I could kind of figure out what I liked. And I loved that because I wasn't totally sure. I knew I liked editing, but I was like, you get down the road on something and it could end up not being what you envisioned in terms of a job. So I left. And I think that's also healthy, is to leave your options open a little bit, figure out what you like doing, and try every opportunity that you're able to. If you're one of those people that doesn't know what you're going to do with the rest of your life, I'm assuming if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have some idea, but I wouldn't go and say, oh, I'm not good at this, I'm not good at that. Like, I went into intermediate audio production, and I am not an audio guru by any means. And I realized that by the time I finished beginner audio production, went into intermediate, and I was like, I'm not good at this, and I'm not having fun. And then I figured it out afterwards. And so, but I always remember that time in my friend's literally bedroom at his house. He probably has no idea this was such a formative experience for me now. But yeah, that was when I realized I loved editing video. And I think a lot of our experiences growing up, we may not realize how so many of these little things, if we just paid attention, would lead us into the jobs we have now. And I think if we were a little more like self-aware and present and asking ourselves what we really like to do versus what everybody else wants us to do, or what our parents want us to do, or what we think we might be good at but we don't enjoy, then we would just get to where we're going a lot faster.
Yeah, one thing I found frustrating about being in high school and like in college as well, you have to take all these classes, and I think it's good to have that wide breadth and sort of experience different things, whether it's chemistry or English or whatever. But what ends up happening, I think, is most people know what they don't want to do at that age. You know, right. They've tried all these subjects, and probably most of them they're not super fond of. But then it's like, well, what do I want to do? Yeah. And I like what you said about essentially just trying new things and saying yes to as much as you can, especially when, you know, late teens, early 20s, or just your 20s in general, just kind of saying yes and seeing what happens. And, you know, you said that you didn't feel like you had a knack for audio, audio editing, just in general. I don't either. Yeah, audio production. It's just, I don't know. There are some people, they're just audio people. They have like a vibe. I don't know. There's something about them. They're meant to be there. I'm not that guy. And
what they were talking about, like they would say, oh, and you hear when we're EQing this and when we're adding on like these filters. And I was like, what are you saying? Like, I don't hear it. I'm either deaf to something, or I'm not there, and I don't know if I'm ever going to be there. Like I tried really hard. I passed. I think I got a B, but I was like, I'm done. This was exhausting. Like it was fun when I wasn't the one actually like mixing or mastering anything. Like the recording part I got, but it was when it came down to actually like mixing, mastering, whether it was like audio or sound or music, it was just like, it was beyond me. And I thought, okay, I'm not having fun anymore. I did love when we did Foley though. That was my jam. When you had to like Foley. Yeah. So when you're making sounds to go with a video, like footsteps or, you know, planes shaking, you know, we did a whole section of a class on that and had to build like sound stories based on sounds we captured and EQ them and stuff. And that was the best and so much fun. But yeah, ironically, when it got into music, which is what I like, I found it really challenging. So
yeah, I don't know. The path can be weird. Sometimes you expect to like something or to be really good at it, and maybe that's not the case. And then other times the opposite happens. You're like, oh, I'm going to be horrible at this. But then it just kind of works. So I don't know. That's the fun of it, I suppose, is I think the more things that surprise you, the more interesting your life is, I would say.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. So, do you, like, now at this point in your channel's history, like, what is your plan for the future? Do you have goals on the horizon? Are you just going to keep doing what you're doing? Like, when you look forward, what do you see?
I am hopefully in a position, well, I shouldn't say hopefully. My goal is to have more, of a streamlined business model that isn't as, if we're talking about on the business side, I don't want to rely so much on sponsorships. And so I'm developing products and courses that are also going to not only generate income for the business as a whole, but will allow us to do more of the things that we actually think are going to make a difference and work with our subscribers. You know, like I said, more one-on-one. Now that travel's opening up, we're going to do a bit more of those like travel with us, photo trips and things like that. That's starting again. And hiring, well, I just hired a virtual assistant and I've outsourced a little bit marketing wise. So, but I would like a few more members, at least 1 or 2 more full-time members on my team, moving into an office space. That's on the personal side, but on YouTube, I mean, it would be really fun to participate in some longer form doc series. But otherwise, just keep, teaching online. There's so much to cover. We never get bored of, featuring different pieces of gear or how to use them or tutorials and things like that. So we would keep up with our content in that sense. I would like this to be less of just a YouTube channel and more of a business and brand, more education focused. That's not just through YouTube content.
Mm-hmm. And I think your next step with like hiring more people is super important. Like if you're going to take things to the next level, I think it's important that you're doing as much of the work that you actually want to do as possible, or maybe a better way of phrasing it is doing as much of the work that only you can do as possible. I think a lot of editing or like organizing or whatever, there's a lot of people with those skills, but when it comes to like creating the vision and making it happen, like you with your channel, you're the only one who can really do that. So I think a mistake that I've certainly fallen into in the past is that I'm doing too much grunt work, essentially. And you're never really going to take things to the next level if you're constantly bogged down by all of the just day-to-day stuff. Yeah. And I think that's smart. I think that's great. And I'm excited for you.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. We're trying over here. So we're trying.
Yeah, no, it seems like you're doing great. You even got a reward behind you. An award, that's the word. An award.
I help
what
it.
Is that?
I keep it there to remind myself that I don't suck. No, it's my my award, my buffer reward for. I'm trying to remember does it say which one it is on it? Canadian of Excellence. I think it was sponsored by Henry's. So Buffer is like a creator event, big YouTuber event that happens in a couple different cities. There's actually going to be one in Toronto again in late August. So I'm so excited that's happening again. It's basically like a giant film screening for content creators. So it's super fun and you can win awards. And I did that year, and that was my first year that I was actually participating in the festival. And so that was very surprising and awesome. That was like the best thing. That was the best day.
Well, so you like screen something you made in front of an actual real life audience.
Yeah. Wow. It was like real life. Yeah.
That's super
cool.
It
was terrifying.
Yeah, that's one thing about YouTube that like it's cool that you can reach so many people, but like you're never quite experiencing what other people are experiencing when they're watching your stuff. And I'm sure that's another level of like excitement, but also nervousness. And congrats, like the fact you got that award is really cool. That must have felt great.
Yeah, it was a particularly meaningful piece as well, because I made it about my dad who passed away a few years ago. So I think I may have got, a little bit of the tear jerk card going on there. So sorry I made you guys cry and feel bad. But the idea was it was supposed to be more focused on like the feeling of it rather than having something really highly produced. And so it was just done in one shot. It was a top down of, you can find it on my channel. It's called Finding You. And it's a top down on a table. And I just put like family photos down one by one, like just my hands putting the photos down, all one shot. I timed it to my voiceover. And the voiceover was just like this spew of like everything I felt about it all in one go. And it ended up sounding poetic, which worked out. And I think that was intentional. I mean, it always comes out like in a creative way when you're trying to describe emotions and that kind of thing. And so my idea was to make something really powerful, but execute it in a really simple way that wasn't super flashy in this big production. And so really focusing on, and that's what I try to do with a lot of my work, just how it makes you feel when you see it or hear it or watch it. Because that's way more important to me than how, even though the visuals are obviously important and that can play a part in the story, which it definitely did, I didn't want it to be overdone. And the message was what I really wanted to come through. And I thought, okay, this will be like a unique thing to show at the festival. But I definitely did not anticipate at all winning an award that year, being even in the running, being even, I was just excited to be there. I was excited to be invited. And so that was like the cherry on top. And it felt like, okay, now, like for me, for my experience with, my dad passing away, it was like, okay, I closed the book on that. That was closure. And so I kind of got all of that out in one go. And now it's nice that it can live online as like a bit of a reminder of him and my experience in that and with him and that whole thing. So it was meaningful. And so that's also why I love having it up, because it was like for that video too, which was really cool. And it's nice. I think anyone, if you win an award for anything, you should keep it out, put it on a shelf, don't hide it away, because a lot of times we don't give ourselves enough credit for being good at the stuff that we're good at.
Mm-hmm. For real. And especially on those kind of down days, when maybe you're not feeling the best, having a physical thing that is a reminder of something you've accomplished, it can actually be very helpful.
For sure.
Yeah, they do. I think I don't know, those really bad days, they're important, but also they suck. So it's, I think, good to have something to take the edge off if possible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm also happy that you were able to kind of transmute the sadness about your dad passing into something beautiful and helpful and award-winning even. So I think that's kind of the goal of a lot of people who are getting into the arts. Is that wasn't your goal?
I mean, I think if you're making something like that, you should make it for yourself and not worry too much about what other people think about it. And it should just be your experience. I think that's kind of like where we get lost. And like if anyone's trying to make that type of video, and where it like kind of goes wrong is if they make it too much with other people in mind. Like it's supposed to be just about, it's your story. Like you make it how you want and it'll come across well,
I agree. You should make things for yourself, not as some, grandiose gesture or whatever. I think that is fantastic advice. And Lizzie, it has been wonderful talking to you. The technical difficulties still couldn't stop us. And why don't you tell people where they can find you and pitch the things you would like to pitch?
Will do. You can find me on the YouTube, on the Instagram, on the TikTok at Lizzie Pierce. Lizzie is spelled with an IE and Pierce is spelled with an EI. I realize it's confusing and I'm very sorry about it. You can watch any of my YouTube content about photo, video, tutorials, travel content, inspirational content, business tips, all that stuff. On my website, I've got a lot of free products if you guys want to check that out. Budget estimate templates, presets, stuff like that, and soon courses, hopefully.
Right on. And there you have it. Lizzie Pierce, everybody. Go check out her channel and everything she just mentioned. You will not be disappointed. And thank you so much for joining me. This was a great conversation. I feel like, I always like getting a feel for people's life stories and kind of how they got to where they are. I've learned a lot through all these interviews. And I'm glad to have heard your story as well.
Absolutely. It was great learning about you too.
Oh, well, thank you. And, you, the viewer, thanks for watching. I appreciate you. And I'm sure Lizzie does too. And, hit subscribe if you want. You won't regret it, whatever platform you're on.
Do that.
And maybe I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everybody.